We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata. Mike, what is up?
I feel like I know the championship game just happened. To me, feels like off-season time, and I very. I mean, I watched a couple free agent guys this weekend, and then I downloaded my first college games to start the grind. And the I think 3 month long process that awaits us.
It has been the longest, and I know it's not technically the off season for the NFL, but for the Cincinnati Bengals since they last played, I'm just ready for 44 days away from free agency. The franchise tag. Senior Bowl is coming up this weekend, so there's something to talk about when it comes to that and possible players for the Cincinnati Bengals because they love their Senior Bowl guys. But I'm just ready for some news on the Bengals side. Um, but at this very moment, there is a little news in the AFC and the NFC. AFC Championship. I have learned my lesson. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Baltimore Ravens 17-10, and I have learned to never bet against Patrick Mahomes. We did state when we talked about him, I was a little hesitant, even though I did say they were going to lose by 2 scores.
Yeah,
That
man, I felt so good about the Chiefs, but I still picked the Ravens. I thought they were the better team, and I was like, man, why did I do the thing where I flipped last week and I didn't do it this way? I should have just stuck with it. Now I feel stupid.
man, it's absolutely insane because the thing is, there's so many you can look at that game in so many different ways. You can look at how the Baltimore Ravens played and they defensively they showed up, but offensively
Especially
they
the second half.
I mean, it's absolutely insane. If you would have told me that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to score 17 points, I would have said the Baltimore Ravens won.
Mhm.
Maybe they don't score in the 30s, but I would have thought they did enough. They probably, got a couple touchdowns, maybe some field goals, but they definitely scored more than the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I think if you're the Baltimore Ravens and you only put up 10 points, you're the number 1 seed, you only needed to win 2 games to get to the Super Bowl. One of the best seasons, the top defense in the NFL, home field advantage against a Kansas City Chiefs a team that struggled, quite a bit, I would say, offensively. Not on Patrick Mahomes as much of his wide receivers when it comes to drops. His defense has, I felt like, always been there this season, honestly, for the last 2 years. But they did enough. That they made some big time throws. I think Travis Kelsey and Patrick Mahomes, not well, Patrick Mahomes has showed up, but Patrick is a different dude when it comes to January. Not to say he isn't during regular season because he obviously has the numbers, but when he's out there familiar with it, yes, it's a road game for him, but he still got the job done and his weapons showed up. I mean, goodness, who would have thought one of his top wide receivers, not even top wide receivers, one of his wide receivers who has dropped the ball multiple times, makes the key first down catch to pretty much seal the deal in the game when it mattered most. And for my lesson is never bet against Patrick Mahomes, and I should know better because we've watched him plenty of times against the Cincinnati Bengals over the last few years. He knows what it takes to do enough. Even though the second half they weren't really getting a lot done, but I felt like they were just controlling the ball and keeping it out of Lamar's hands, and that was a key game plan for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think the KC offense has been good this postseason, and maybe not consistently good. You could think of they did enough in the Miami game to win, but they weren't dominant. Which I guess is why you. Well, I guess Fangio wanted to leave. First, I was like, I guess that's why you let the defensive coordinator go that put them in that situation. Then they were very good against the Bills, and then I thought last night, evening, afternoon, one of the three, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I thought the Chiefs' offense was very good in the first half, like dominantly good in the first half, and then 5 straight punts. And part of me wonders because I felt like the calling of the game turned into a little bit of run, pass, punt, like nonstop. And they got some first downs in there, but they weren't able to sustain those drives and score points.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they were down and or at least tied, and they were trying to push the ball the same way they did in the first half. If the Chiefs score 28, or they ended up with 17. So 24, 27, somewhere in that range. And we're thinking of a pretty good Chiefs performance rather than the 17-point game. But it was close enough that maybe they were up 2 scores most of the time, is all I was thinking. And with how good they looked in the first half, maybe it could just be for first or second half adjustments. But part of me wanted to see what would have happened if they got pressed and forced to pass the ball a little bit more in that second half. I mean, if Zay Flowers doesn't fumble the ball, they probably have to, we're only up 3. We got to push the ball. Same with, I feel like if you're up 1 score, you might just have to push the ball. That throw that Lamar got picked on, which was never open, but I respect Isaiah Likely for just throwing the hand up. Anyway, receivers always think they're open. That is on the quarterback to know that guy is not open. Don't throw that ball. I don't care if he thinks he's open. But it's just the cojones on him. He's got 3 guys on him. Hands up. I'm open. Throw it up.
And he did.
He tried. It didn't work out. But yeah, that was a 2nd and 10 from the 25. That just took points off the board. So 2 separate instances where, let's just say you get a field goal there. You don't get the first down. It's 3rd and 10. You get stopped, kick a field goal, and Zay Flowers scores. That's a tie game. That would be a tie game. Instead, you're dealing with what happened. And yeah, I thought the turnovers were the biggest thing for the Ravens. You got that strip sack in their own area as well. So was that the sequence after that they had back-to-back holding calls on Trey Smith and took a touchdown off the board? And I don't remember if they scored or not on that drive, but yeah, all 3 of those turnovers to me were brutal. And just it's easy to point to why you lost this game when you scored 10 points and turned the ball over 3 times.
Should have had 4 turnovers, if we're being honest. One of the KC defenders had it, and it fell right out of his hands. So it's absolutely.
Which one? I don't know if. Bolton had one.
Yeah, but
I think. And then there was also, I was thinking of the one where Lamar was falling down and kind of threw it right into Trent McDuffie.
I mean, you got to be smart in those situations. But like, I think it proves there's so many things to take away from it. There's more. I'm going to connect it to the Bengals because it is a Bengals podcast in our next segment. But I want to stay with what you have right now. You are the Baltimore Ravens. Are you absolutely sick to your stomach? You have the season that they had dominating. I know there was, questions at that Thursday night football game. What if Joe Burrow didn't get injured? What would it have looked like? Yeah, they probably end up still winning the AFC North, but still, you're the number 1 seed. You have the top defense. How are you feeling this morning if you're the Baltimore Ravens?
Yeah, sick. Yeah. How are they going to be better next year? I mean, they're losing some talent. Some guys are getting older, and it's just tough because you're going to lose guys, or maybe you pay Madubuike, and that keeps the best talent that possibly leaving in town. They still lose some guys that are veteran role players, and Zeitler will be a year older, Moses a year older, and it just maybe Linderbaum steps up even more in his 3rd year, and Zay Flowers is better next year. But I just wonder, like, how can you get better than this year, especially health wise too? They were pretty healthy all year, which is, other than Andrews being out, but he played in that game, even if it wasn't full speed. And Likely was awesome. And I know that they don't like to put those 2 on the field together. So I don't think it's going to be some secret 12 evolution where it's Likely and Andrews smoking people from tight end, because they're both kind of more slot wide receiver types than they are tight ends. They can line up there and play okay, but they're at their best in space. So I just wonder, how do you get better? Maybe you just it's tough. It's like when you have your healthiest and best season and you give your shot at a Kansas City team that is having maybe its worst year. Mm-hmm. And they weren't very healthy. They were missing their all-pro left guard. I think they're fairly healthy on defense, although Willie Gay, one of their starting linebackers, was out. Still pretty healthy on defense, but the offense has just been doo-doo a lot of the regular season. They've stepped up in the playoffs, and they've been pretty good in the playoffs. I still think when you look at them on paper, you go, it's not the greatest offense I've ever seen. And Travis Kelce looks like Travis Kelce again.
Does.
So I think that's a big part on why this offense is doing so well, even if he looked slow at the end of the regular season. Maybe that was just a energy conservation thing, and now he's letting it all go now. But the receivers are still all whatever. Like Rashee Rice is solid, pretty good player. And then you've got AFC Championship MVS, always making a clutch play when when it needs to happen.
Too
But
soon.
Richie James and all the Justin Watson, these guys, like they're probably going to have a better third target next year if Kelsey stays and doesn't retire. Which now I don't know if he does because he looks pretty good.
He
So
does,
yeah,
man.
I have a lot of questions of like you were able to give Kansas City your best shot. You might lose Mike McDonald next year. It's
Oh,
tough. If I was a Ravens fan, that is tough for me in terms of that was probably our best chance. And that doesn't mean they can't make it next year. They can't
yeah.
whatever. Like this football, it's a sudden death elimination playoff. So there's a lot of luck and variance that goes into this. But in my mind, if I was a Ravens fan, I would be wondering how are we going to do this again? Like how do we stay as injury free, and how do we get better to give them an even better shot next year? And I feel like the pathways to get there are really tough.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're watching the season, all of the injuries, and yes, it hit closer to home because you see a guy like Joe Burrow go out. The Bengals had plenty of injuries, but just overall in the AFC alone, when you look at some of these starting quarterbacks, if you're the Baltimore Ravens, you're like, we are getting the weakest Chiefs team in the last 6 years. You got to take advantage of this. You're playing at home. I was absolutely, I don't know if I was shocked when I started to watch it because I'm like, this is just what Patrick Mahomes does. This is just what they, that they're familiar with. It's January. He's been here before, and maybe it's going to catch up to Lamar Jackson playing in this AFC Championship game. And it just really did. He didn't. He looked okay in the first half, but in the second half, it just wasn't the same. And it felt like they got away from, even though the Chiefs were up by a couple scores at one point and then only one score, they got away from what worked for them, and it's
Yeah.
running the ball. And
Yeah. 6 handoffs
I don't
the
understand
entire
it.
game. That was crazy. Yeah, that was to me very much a Todd Monken, not a playoff experienced play caller situation where it's 10 points. You don't need to just throw the ball. You don't need to press like this. You don't need to try to force everything. Like 10-point game to me until the fourth quarter, you stay within yourself. You try to keep the offense what it is. You keep your identity. They didn't, and they paid for it. It was kind of funny. It's like you kind of need like a Greg Roman on the sideline going like run the ball type of thing. Where, but even though I think Monk has been better for this team than Roman was the past couple years, it's just like maybe they needed that voice to yell at them to run the ball right now. Like just don't lose yourself to this because there were Lamar Jackson runs, and I know that QB power was awesome on
Mhm.
fourth down. Other than that, I feel like there were a lot of scrambles. So these weren't like called run plays. There were pass plays that he just decided to tuck it and run. I thought the Ravens offensive line was pretty good. I know the Chiefs defensive line might have been better, but I felt like that was mostly in the second half when they just start teeing off on all these, when you're just dropping back every play type of thing the Bengals have dealt with too. But when they were running the ball, I mean, Gus Edwards was having a pretty good game running the ball. And then they stopped giving him the ball, and they started playing Justice Hill more. And Justice Hill kept messing up. It was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I had a lot of questions about the Ravens' offensive game plan, not about their defense. I thought their defensive game plan was good. I thought at first I was a little like, ooh, is
Mhm.
Andy Reid getting into the Mike McDonald defense? Is he able to find and felt like McDonald made the adjustments and made the proper move. Now, I will say the one thing we also need to talk about my fellow Italian, Steve Spagnuolo, one of the best defensive coordinators of all time. Let's be real about it. He
Yeah.
just stopped this offense. He has been excellent basically every postseason. He was the 2007 Giants defensive coordinator when they stopped the perfect Patriots. I think it's about time we recognize him as one of the best, at least in the last generation of defensive coordinators.
Yeah, someone should hire him.
They should, but I don't even know. I wonder if he wants to be a head coach
He
because he
doesn't.
was he was for the Rams and it went terrible.
Yeah.
I wonder if he even wants to do it. Like if he's just kind of like has the Wade Phillips feeling of like I don't even want to do it. Like I just want to coach defense, man.
That's how I would feel. But yeah, I don't see him leaving Kansas City anytime soon. And good for them and their young defense because that's still a young team. when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs.
Mm.
But next, we'll get into a little AFC connection. I heard it on plenty of ESPN shows this morning, articles right after the game, connection to Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. A little more into the AFC Championship weekend. A friend of mine is a Chiefs fan, and he has said to me, you know what? I miss Joe Burrow in the playoffs. It wasn't as fun. It wasn't as fun this year. I can't believe he could say that when they're going back to the Super Bowl after what was technically a down year for the Kansas City Chiefs. It felt different, obviously, in the last 2 years. I know a lot of people say, oh, Cincinnati's only seen that success for a couple years. What are they talking about? They don't have any rings. But still, I look forward to the Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes matchup. Seeing it the last 2 years in the AFC Championship, was bummed to not see it again. And can't wait to get updates on Joe Burrow. But there is that connection of there's one guy who's active in the NFL who can stop this guy. The mismatch, the rivalry, the games when they play each other, it's always by 3 points. It's a crazy first half, and sometimes it's toe to toe and to the very end. Even Patrick Mahomes said it after the game last week when he played the Buffalo Bills. You know, he likes going up against guys like Lamar, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. It's always a close game and a battle. And right now, Joe, the Cincinnati Bengals, I know it was a different game this past year because Joe Burrow wasn't playing and Jake Browning started the game, but they still almost had a shot to take that one. You know, what do you take from that when you look at the AFC picture as a whole? I know how you feel about quarterback ranking, so I'm not making you do any of that. But just when you think about the Cincinnati Bengals team, draft guy Jared, friend of the show, big time for him because he's getting into off-season mode and all of his draft.
Isn't he always in off-season mode?
He really is. But he had said today, and he goes, I can't believe I just, realized it right now, or I'm admitting this, but he's like, I truly think that the Bengals would have been in the AFC Championship if Joe Burrow was healthy. When you think about Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes and the battles and what we've, just watched in their 4 matchups together, the Cincinnati Bengals 3-1, do you think the Cincinnati Bengals, even a down year for this defense, would have stopped this Kansas City Chiefs team?
I think the defense, what we saw, wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they make the AFC Championship game on some shootouts and everything, but I feel like if they made the playoffs, it would have been a rough road this year, just because the defense never clicked. It never came together, and you had the moment of like, okay, this is who they are, and let's say they step up. Step up from what? Like bad to below average? Average? And I feel like this Chiefs offense has been, like I said, really good. At least maybe not as consistent as you'd like, but really good in the playoffs, especially when they need points. So I wonder about that. I wonder if they could have made the AFC Championship game. I wonder at times, I'm like, man, I know they've matched up well with the Bills, but maybe even run into that shootout and does something go wrong there? Or the Texans beat them. So, maybe they would have been able to give them all they could handle. I don't know, because I do think that they have a great game planning defensive coordinator. The guys would need to execute that game plan, but I feel like he would have put something together for the defense, and they probably can do just enough on offense to get through a couple of those games, at least one of those games, if not 2, and then you're in the AFC Championship game. So it's possible. I don't know. I think Burrow's great. I think the offense would have been great. I don't think they would have been a reason that this team lost, but I feel like this defense may have given them their what happens to the Bills every year, where the offense does a great job. Well, not every year. They didn't do a great job last year against the Bengals, but getting eliminated by the Chiefs twice, and both times there was a shootout where the offense played really well. I feel like that could have happened to the Bengals, where they played really well, they got into a shootout and just came up short.
There's a couple things that when I watched this Kansas City Chiefs team, and even Joe Burrow said it in the press conference right after the season when he said it's usually when we really start to heat up in November. He was kind of referencing when he got hurt in the Thursday Night Football game versus the Ravens. And it made me think a lot about kind of what we deal with going into every September for Zach Taylor, his coaching staff, Joe Burrow. I know we can look a lot on not having a normal training camp. And look, we can admit that they're going to be going into these OTAs to be determined on when Joe Burrow is going to be throwing, but optimistic that it's going to be this spring and in June and May when they get back out there. And I know some of them report late April, so to be determined on those updates. But it kind of just makes me feel like the beginning of seasons really, this is going to sound like a hot take because getting the number 1 seed is definitely a goal, and being at the top and winning your AFC North, winning your division, getting home playoff games. You want all of that to happen. But the Chiefs are proving, and yes, they have Patrick Mahomes, and he's been here before. It just get into the dance. We've watched the Cincinnati Bengals do it. Yeah, they win their division, but they have to play 3 games to get to a Super Bowl. They were a play away from going to another Super Bowl in back-to-back years. It really just matters on keeping number 9 healthy and getting into the playoffs. And honestly, that's kind of what I'm thinking about when I go into next year. Not use I'm trying to use the Kansas City Chiefs as an example, but it just has proven over the last few years when Joe is healthy, you get hot right in the middle, coming off a bye, right in November, December, and January, and then just get it going. Stay healthy, have a little luck on your side. But I think all of that stuff is extremely important when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs right now. I think that they were the laughing stock on Christmas when they lost at Arrowhead and people were leaving the stadium early. They couldn't do anything. Even the Raiders in the second half weren't doing anything offensively, and the Chiefs still lost that game. And some people thought, are they even going to win their division? Are the Raiders going to come up? Or even the Broncos at this moment? Are they going to be first-round exits? What's Patrick Mahomes going to look like on the road when he's playing these road playoff games? And I think at the end of the day, all this stuff it's nice to get the number 1 seed. It's nice to get home field advantage. It would be awesome for the Cincinnati Bengals to have an AFC Championship game at home. But it's all about just keeping Joe Burrow healthy for me going into next year. Keep Joe Burrow healthy, get hot at the right time, like they normally do in the midpoint of the season. And that starting the season 0-1, 0-2, yeah, it can make things difficult, but that's just not kind of my main focus right now. It is just, and obviously when you have a quarterback who just is coming off a major injury, it's keep your franchise healthy. And after that, just see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Like I mentioned, I think on the last episode, was just the teams that usually make the Super Bowl are some of the healthiest teams in the league, especially at their key positions. I don't want to just read an injury report and see a bunch of backups miss the game. It's like we look at the Chiefs. I know Joe Tooney missed the game and he might miss next week. And I guess, well, Charles Omenihu, who was healthy, but I guess he's going to miss the Super Bowl. And he's kind of a key guy, I feel like. Yeah, I feel like guys didn't talk about him enough. I looked up his stats. Like, he had 7 sacks this year. Why has nobody talked about this guy on 400 snaps or something like that? Like, it's an insane rate. And I guess the Willie Gay thing, but overall, like, you've got your stars on defense are healthy. Your quarterback, your number 1 and number 2 targets are both healthy. Your running back's healthy. You still have most of the offensive line healthy. It's like you look at that, like, I mean, missing one guy on a playoff run, that would have been the best. That would be nice. It would have been the healthiest Bengals offensive line in the playoffs in history, even if it was the best player. So yeah, I think some of that has to do with it. It's just keep Burrow healthy, of course, have the luck that Jamar Chase and your key pieces, Trey Hendrickson, which some of that can also come back to Trey Hendrickson playing less snaps, which I felt like he was coming off the field more this year, but maybe not. Like Trey Hendrickson may play a little bit less snaps, so you keep him healthy throughout the whole thing. I do think I would love to see them start faster. That is just, I am so tired of watching them get to 2-2 and 1-3. They're like, oh, how are they going to dig themselves out? And like they dig themselves out of the hole. But hey, what if you were never in that hole and then you hit this run anyway? It's like you could be the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed. Instead, it feels like they're always digging themselves out of a hole and fighting to get into that 3-4 type of spot. And I'd rather they didn't have to do that. So I think it's keep Burrow healthy, and that includes training camp and this offseason for the first time in his life.
I think you watch these playoffs, and this isn't breaking any news, and I think we all feel this way when you come off a season, when you think about this offensive line and just the defensive line. But I'm going into the draft, I'm going into free agency thinking trenches, 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 trenches. I wouldn't be surprised if a wide receiver or a tight end is available, because you see some of these tight ends. I don't think it's the same rookie class going into this year, but the playoffs. I mean, guys like George Kittle, no, he's not a rookie. Travis Kelce, not a rookie. Sam Laporta, and in a lot of moments for the Detroit Lions, it's stuff that's missing for this team. Maybe it's upgrading the tight end room, but getting to the quarterback, putting pressure on the quarterback, having playmakers out there is going to be extremely important. And I think you go into this offseason thinking it's trenches, because you want to be like these teams that are left. I wouldn't even say it's it's like that for the 49ers, but it feels that way with the Kansas City Chiefs on both sides of the ball. Chris Jones is a whole nother animal in the postseason. He truly is. Every single time I see him out there, I'm like, man, you need a guy like that alongside Trey Hendrickson. Not Chris Jones. I don't think he's going to be leaving Kansas City, but they do need some difference makers like that in these moments. And I think that's kind of a huge thing going into this offseason when they're sitting back and watching these playoff games.
Yep, I agree. I mean, tight end game record on the interior of the defense felt like those were two common themes, especially, I mean, this year, especially tight end seemed to be huge. Like every team that made the Final Four had a capable, good tight end that they could throw to. I don't know if that's just a coincidence type thing, but when the Bengals are trotting out one of the league worst tight ends as their starters, maybe you look to invest a little bit in that position. I don't know if they will, but something to think about if Bowers falls. Just like take him, just take him, just take Bowers if he's there. I don't know if I subscribe. Like, do you? Completely off topic. We are in off-season mode.
Sorry, we are.
Would you trade up for Bowers? I haven't watched them, so I don't have like the hottest take on this or anything.
So no, I wouldn't, and I don't think that the Cincinnati Bengals.
What if it's like 15? What if he falls to 15? Would you trade the 3 spots? Say it's like a 5th round pick you had to give up for
100%. You have to. You have to.
I think that's for it. Like I wouldn't trade up into the top 10 and give up a future first or something. But if he was at like 15 and you're like, okay, I'm stopping the slide. It's kind of like the Bills did last year with Kincaid, where they see him falling, and they're like, let's go up and get him.
Do you think the Cincinnati Bengals would have drafted Dalton Kincaid?
Yeah, I think I actually heard something about that he was pretty high on their board. I don't know if he's higher than Murphy, though. I wonder about that. But if Murphy went, do they draft Kincaid? And maybe they draft Kincaid over Murphy. I don't know. The age thing is what I kept going back to in my mind about that. It's like Kincaid's 24, I think.
Yeah, he's in retirement.
Like Murphy was like a baby.
Yeah, he's 21, which is absolutely crazy. Maybe 22 now.
I think he's 22 now. But he was 21 until very late this year.
Yeah, but I think, there are a lot of decisions that this club has to make. And I'm not a Super Bowl or bust person. I think they can get to a Super Bowl. They've been to a Super Bowl. I think they could do it again. I do think that they have a few more pieces that they need to softly get in the offseason. That's going to be extremely important on the defensive line and even offensive line. But I think of it more as what the Cincinnati front office is going to do. And I don't see them moving up to get him. But I think we all have to remember we're recording this 3 months out from an NFL draft. So many of these players could fall and not end up being in the top 10, could be top 15, could be there at 18. There's a lot of things that will happen when it comes to, some of these workouts, the combine, everything. Just give it time and we'll see what happens. But I don't know. I still feel like the Bengals are in a really good position according to a lot of these mock drafts from the experts when it comes to some of these game-changing players on the defensive line. And maybe they get their future right tackle. At some point, this team needs to hit on an offensive lineman. And we'll see if it's in this draft. But draft talk. We'll move into that another time. Still plenty of NFL games to talk about when we look at the NFC Championship next on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Moving on to the NFC Championship side. When I watch the NFC, I really just don't have any dog in the fight. And I'm just like, okay, give me a good game. Maybe play some extra football. No pressure. Hopefully we get
no dog in the fight.
I kind of wanted
our cat brethren.
I wanted the Lions to win, but in my head, and look, I've already said it on this podcast. I wanted the Kansas City Chiefs to beat the Ravens. I want Joe Burrow to be the only guy who can stand in the way of messing all of this up. But if the Kansas City Chiefs go off and win another Super Bowl, that's going to be really annoying. But we'll move on to this NFC Championship game. Man, I had to listen to the first half in the car. I was on my way home from something. So I'm like, no way. The Detroit Lions, they're up right now. They're about to just probably put up 30 plus on these guys. They're going to walk away. This game isn't even going to be close. Brock Purdy struggling. This is pretty normal. What we saw last week in the Green Bay Packers game. Packers had opportunities to win that game and send the Niners home. but the 49ers and Brock Purdy found a way to come back. I mean, there's so many moments if you're the Detroit Lions fan, and there's things I want to ask you when it comes to Dan Campbell, because I think he's getting criticized today, and I don't really know if I agree with it compared to some of these players dropping passes when it comes to fumbles, just mistakes. They were a Josh Reynolds catch away from just putting this game away.
Saw
And
a stat, by the way.
what?
Josh Reynolds' career drop percentage is like 6%. In the playoffs, it's 24%.
He is not a Bengal this offseason. That's for sure. He's not.
You've
He was
seen enough.
time. Well, I mean, they had interest in him, and that never really happened. And you know what? Some things work out the way they're supposed to. But yeah, for the Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell, there were opportunities, and he never really changed from his regular season mindset when he went into the playoffs. I'm going to gamble. I'm going to go for it on fourth down. I'm not going to kick field goals. And I get it. At one point, one of the field goals wasn't super close, but I feel like still makeable for the Detroit Lions. And he decided, I'm going for touchdowns. I'm going for first downs. And unfortunately, that didn't work out for the Detroit Lions. If you are watching them from afar, you could be a Detroit Lions fan or just an NFL. We were. Yeah, you're right.
I was
Detroit
watching
Lions.
from afar.
Man, I'm going to tell you right now, I was sitting there thinking at halftime, I think it would be the perfect end of this season if the Lions just win it all. I wouldn't care. It wouldn't impact my team at all. Go have the Lions win. And then I got some pushback from people who said, well, you don't want the Cincinnati Bengals to be the only franchise without a Super Bowl. And I'm like, well, Cleveland Browns fans still think that the
Lions won those championships too.
I know. It wouldn't have bothered me. I would have loved
the
everything.
Chargers, the Panthers. There's a bunch of teams that haven't won a Super Bowl. Like the Texans.
Yeah, it wouldn't. It really wouldn't bother me if the Detroit Lions won it all. It honestly,
Vikings, Bills.
Yeah, the Bills, man. Whew, that would have bothered me more. I'm not gonna lie. If the Buffalo Bills won, it would have bothered me more.
I'm just thinking, like, there's actually a lot of teams that haven't won a Super Bowl.
I know, but there was like, oh, you don't want the Lions, who are kind of in a similar situation the Cincinnati Bengals were in 2021, to go off and win the Super Bowl. It wouldn't have hurt me. It wouldn't have.
I would have loved to see that happen. What do you mean?
The only NFC teams that I want to win are the teams that aren't playing against my team in a Super Bowl. Other than that, I do not care what the NFC does. I do not care if Brock Purdy wins a Super Bowl. Good for him. I actually hope he does win the Super Bowl. But I think overall in this game, if you were watching it and you think of some of Dan Campbell's decisions, are you criticizing him today?
No, two reasons. One, I felt like most of those were the correct decision for how aggressive he is normally. And two, this ties into one. They kept their identity. When you think about the Ravens losing their identity and trying to be something they weren't and losing that game because of it, I mean, the Lions scored 31 points. I know you talk about some points left on the board. I would complain a little more about how this defense played in the second half. But we look at that. There is one decision I want to criticize a little bit, but the fourth downs, no. And we are a dropped pass and, away from one of those being the right call. And everybody thinks it's the right call. But so much of was that fourth down decision the right call is based off whether or not it worked. But they're an aggressive team and they're going to go for it. I liked most of those calls. The one thing I will complain about is I did not like when they ran the ball and they brought in David Montgomery to run the ball on that 3rd and goal, and then they didn't get it. And then you have to burn a timeout. Brutal. That was devastating. To me, I was watching and went, oh no, because your options there are let 25 seconds bleed off the clock or call a timeout. And I just don't think either one was worth it when you're down 10. And let's say you don't get the first down again, throwing the ball. What you could do is kick the field goal right after and then
exactly
and onside kick it, try to get it. And maybe you don't get it, but you can force, 3 timeouts, can force a punt and then have another shot at it. When you lost that 3rd timeout, that was just a brutal way for that to happen. And once I saw Montgomery come in, I went, oh, this fake it to him, because Kansas City is probably also keyed in on, they brought in the bulldozer. Like, okay, let's go knock them down. And that's what happened. It was too obvious to me. And it had way too much risk compared to, and it's weird to talk about with a run play, but way too much risk compared to the reward that they could have gotten from like the odds of getting the reward, which is a touchdown. Was it really a higher percentage chance play than throwing the ball there? They got it the next play on the throw. So I feel like they could have just passed the ball in that situation, kept the third timeout. And I know it's a slim chance that you both force that punt and then also drive down the field and score, but it could happen. And the chances of everything happening went so much further down after they didn't get that run.
I think when they got into field goal range, I would have kicked the field goal right away. I know that probably I know you need the touchdown and you're driving and you're able to get down the field and it makes all the sense in the world. I feel like they wasted way too much time. I truly do. It was just
Here's why you don't. Let's say you score that touchdown, you could win. Right? Like if you kick that field goal, you can win in regulation by going for 2. You score that touchdown, and then let's say you get the ball back and you drive, like there's a big play, you're down at the 5. I'm not kicking that field goal. I'm going for the touchdown after that. And then you score 2 touchdowns, you win the game. So
you're right.
I get it. I don't think I would kick that field goal when I was in field goal range. I think you go for the touchdown on the chance that you could then drive back down the field and score another touchdown, win the game, and not even have to do any go for 2 type of thing.
Maybe it was because there was like all the time was clicking off when they were finally able to score the touchdown. And the onside kick, there was a tiny bit of an opportunity.
Was he like a yard early
and
then didn't catch it either?
Yeah. I mean, it ended up being a good game. Credit to the Lions. They were able to give us some good games over the whole entire time they were in the playoffs, and their fans, the whole Ford Field, when they showed Ford Field with all the fans there, I think that's really awesome for I'm sure a lot of fan bases would like a team to do that. If your team's playing on the road, go watch it in the stadium. Can't imagine how they were feeling when the Detroit Lions were up by 3 scores at halftime and just being there and realize they just melted down and you're not even at the real game. That would be
that to me, the thing that was really sad watching that game was the second half. Once the Gibbs fumble happened, it felt like nothing was going to go right in that second half. And that's how it went. Like the team just entirely fell apart. And it was kind of like heartbreaking to me. I was like kind of rooting for them. But then I thought like, these guys have never been to a Super Bowl, even not won it. They've never even been to one.
Yeah, that's pretty
and for
sad.
the fans to get out, like go all the way out there, get excited, even at home watching, and just slowly have your heart ripped out from you in just a grueling fashion over an hour and a half, 2 hours of football at the end of that game it was tough for me. And I was like, I was a pseudo fan. I wasn't a real fan. I was just rooting for the Lions because I thought it was a good story and would like to see a team that hasn't won anything make it. But that was brutal.
It was brutal. I think when you think of the overall matchups and I think of what team can beat Kansas City in the Super Bowl, I still believe in the 49ers. I know they have plenty of moments this season you can look back on and think, I don't really know if they can do it or they're going to be able to win the whole entire thing. And I know that they have history. Obviously, they've won Super Bowls against the Cincinnati Bengals. I know it, but I wouldn't mind if they were able to pull it off. I really am rooting for Kansas or for the 49ers to just run the ball on them, take control. Obviously, we'll give a preview in a week and a half, but I think they give the best matchup to the Kansas City Chiefs.
I hear you. And when the line opened and the 49ers were the favorites, I immediately put a little bit of money on the Chiefs money line.
I did it on the Ravens because I wanted to jinx them.
Okay. And I don't care who wins this game, to be honest with you. Like,
you don't?
The Chiefs, to me, the Chiefs, they've
3 Super Bowls, man. 3 Super Bowls. No pressure going into next year again. I'm over it. I am over it. Even though it didn't bother me.
Win the Super Bowl, they lose their hunger. Travis Kelce retires on top and becomes a Taylor Swift security guard. Sounds like a great end of because the Bengals are out of it. Like I am not the type to care about all this stuff. Like when the Bengals are out of it, I was rooting for the Lions. Now it's the 49ers who have 5 Super Bowls. Or
I know, I don't even care. Add one more. I don't care. But
that's how I feel about both of them. Yeah. Add one more. Who cares?
But let me
The 49ers would be fun because that would take away the Steelers always talk about having
yeah,
6 Super Bowls tied for the most, and they'll
exactly.
still be tied for the most. But yeah, let's throw another team in there.
But
The
you said
Chiefs,
you don't have an interest when the Bengals are out. You're telling me when you
I
watched
just
the
don't have
Super
it.
Bowl last year with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas
Oh,
City,
I was rooting for the Eagles, but that's because the Bengals directly lost.
that was painful. There
Sure.
are times and I'm going to wrap this up after this, but there are times that I look back at the AFC Championship loss last year and the Super Bowl loss, and I think that they're equally painful. Like,
Yeah.
like heart crushed. That AFC
Super Bowl was
Championship
worse.
game. I mean,
The championship game sucked for sure, and
I,
that's why I root for the Chiefs. And I assume if I was a Ravens fan, I'd be rooting for the 49ers. Same if I was a Lions fan, I'd probably root for the Chiefs because you feel that loss, that
yeah.
pain from losing the championship game. But yeah, losing the Super Bowl is worse. Come on, let's be real about it.
I was at the Super Bowl. I'm standing
Which
up in
game you've thought more about the Super Bowl than you have the AFC Championship game?
my wallet took a hit for that Super Bowl loss. But no, I mean, they're both of them back-to-back years. I'll just say this. When I watch Kansas City Chiefs, they're obviously a great team, and Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. I am not breaking any news here. But man, I just want Joe Burrow back out there. That's all I want. Just get back out there, get healthy. Let's see what you look like in the AFC. Let's get this matchup back. I think it's going to be fun. I still am optimistic going into the season, but there's plenty of offseason and free agency news and NFL draft and Joe Burrow rehab to come. But man, I missed him in the playoffs. I really did. It was kind of a bummer most of the season, honestly. And I'm kind of glad that the season's going to wrap up soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not, because I know in 2-3 months I'm gonna be like, oh, sheesh, I miss football. And we get to the point where we hit that tipping point, and I think it's the Hall of Fame game where I think everybody watches like the first drive and go, oh yeah, preseason football stinks, huh? Man, I really miss football. I'm gonna wait for the regular season.
Yeah, no, it should be fun. I'm ready for. There's plenty to talk about. Obviously, we'll preview the Super Bowl next week, and then kind of get into some position groups later this week when it comes to the Bengals offensive line, possible free agents, and soon we will find out what they're doing with T. Higgins, because that franchise tag announcement will be around the corner. Plenty of offseason Bengals news, and I know you'll have work over on all Bengals. What is going to be up there soon?
Not 100% sure. Like, part of me wants to write an article on a guy that maybe they could go after in free agency, but then I wonder, like, would they? I remember doing a whole article on Teron Armstead, and then I was like, are they really going to make a move for him? It didn't. So this happened in my mind because I watched Michael Onwenu. I was like, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool if they signed him, but it'd probably be as a guard. And then I'm like, they're probably not doing that, huh?
Hey, right now we can just dream of who they're going to take.
Right.
And none of it matters, because we'll find out the second week of March what the Cincinnati Bengals team is going to do in free agency. And like I said before, they have to make a decision on running back the first week of March. The bonus is coming. Franchise tag is around the corner. Feel like that's going to be what they're going to do with T. Higgins, and plenty of more talk to come when it comes to this Bengals roster in 2024. And some of the depth pieces. Make sure you check out Mike over on all Bengals on Twitter, Bengals_Sands. You can follow me at LNDS Patterson. Thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.